Our presentation is on labor rights violations. You might be asking yourself, what are labor rights? Well, labor rights refer to the set of legal, social, and economic rights and protections that are afforded to workers. These rights are designed to ensure fair and humane treatment in the workplace, promote safe working conditions, and provide a framework for addressing issues such as wages, working hours, and collective bargaining. Labor rights are essential components of labor law and international human rights law. So overall, it's just the overall fairness of having that job when it comes to wages, how you're being treated, and just so everyone in that space has an equal fair trade. You might be asking, throughout the labor force, there has been a few big issues that have been highlighted just over the whole entire population. Start off freedom of association and collective bargaining. Workers have the right to form or join trade unions to protect their interests. In addition, the right to engage in collective bargaining, allowing workers to negotiate with employees regarding wages, working hours, and other working conditions. In addition, minimum wage. The establishment of a minimum wage ensured that the workers receive a fair and livable wage for their labor. Working hours, regulations on working hours to prevent exploitation and ensure that employees are not overworked. Occupational health and safety, ensuring that the workplaces are safe and healthy environments for workers with regulations in place to prevent accidents and occupational illnesses. Anti-discrimination, protection against discrimination based on factors such as race, gender, religion, age, disability, or any other characteristics. Child labor protections, prohibiting the employment of underage children and establishing standards to protect young workers. Leave and benefits, establishing regulations for paid leave, holiday, and other benefits to support workers' well-being. And last, equal pay for equal work, ensuring that employees receive equal pay for performing the same or sustainability similar work, regardless of gender or other discriminating policies. So these are just issues everyone should know it's in common. Throughout the labor force, there has been relation.
Labor rights violations are vast, but here are a couple of major ones. Forced labor, child labor, dangerous working conditions, underpaying employees, withholding owed employee compensation, discrimination in hiring, employee harassment, blocking unions, unsustainably long hours, and unpaid overtime. Pictured on labor rights. So there are a couple of companies that face labor rights violations. These companies that we detailed include Nike, Foxconn, Walmart, H&M, Amazon, and Starbucks. All of these companies have in common issues in the supply chain. A lot of these companies as well have factories overseas, and the ethics of treating those workers well is really what's been called into question. So Nike has faced criticism for alleged sweatshop conditions, Foxconn, violations in factories, particularly in China, Walmart for its treatment of workers and anti-union practices, H&M for exploitative labor practices in the supply chain, Amazon for treatment of warehouse workers, Starbucks for anti-union work, things like that. There have been calls for increases in worker protection across the board with these companies because practices have been more publicized and people are not okay with that.
Here are some of the labor rights that were focused around Egypt. Starting off with factory workers, industrial workers, especially those employed in factories, may face issues such as low wages, poor working conditions, lack of job security, and limited access to labor unions. In addition, agricultural workers, these working in the agricultural sector, which is a significant part of Egypt's economy, may experience challenges related to low wages, unsafe working conditions, and limited access to social protections. In addition, construction workers, workers involved in the construction industry may face issues such as unsafe working conditions, lack of proper safety measures, and inadequate compensation. Informal sector workers. A significant portion of Egypt's workforce operates in the informal sector. where workers often lack legal protections, job security, and access to social benefits. Domestic workers. People working in domestic roles such as housekeeping and caregivers may face challenges related to low wages, lack of legal protections, and vulnerability to exploitation. Women in the workforce. Women in Egypt may face gender specific labor right challenges, including wage disparities, discrimination, and limited opportunities for career advancement. And last, trade unions. Individuals involved in trade unions advocating for workers' rights may face challenges, including restrictions on organizing, harassment, and limitations on collective bargaining. Now we are going to look at the labor rights compared from this to the United States. Here are some of the labor. In comparison from Europe, now we're going to look at the labor rights that were centered around the United States. Starting off with manufacturing workers, communities with a strong manufacturing presence often face labor right issues. These workers may experience challenges relating to fair wages, working conditions, job security, and the right to organize and bargain collectively. In addition to that, agricultural workers, farm workers, particularly in industries such as fruit picking, face labor right concerns. Issues can include low wages, long hours, and exposure to hazardous conditions, and limited access to benefits and protection, which is very significant. Service industry workers, employees in the service sector, including hospitality, retail, and food services, often encounter labor right issues. These can include low wages, unpredictable schedules, lack of benefits, and inadequate workplace safety measures. And for someone who does work in the food services and workspace, I could definitely say that that is something significant that should definitely be known just from anyone who's working or controlling something like that. And in addition to that, gig economy workers. With the rise of app-based platforms, gig economy workers such as rideshare drivers and delivery personnel face unique labor right challenges. These may include issues related to classification as independent contractors, lack of benefits, and limited job security. And last, immigrant workers. Immigrant communities, particularly undocumented workers, often face labor right violations due to vulnerable status. Exploitation, wage theft, unsafe working conditions, and limited access to legal protections are some of the concerns that they may encounter.
There are other communities besides just Egypt and the United States that are affected by labor rights violations. These are more categorical communities like industrial communities, knowledge-based communities, tourism-dependent communities, and diverse communities. These communities have specific issues within labor rights violations. So for industrial communities, labor rights violations can dramatically impact the state of the labor force, which in turn dramatically impacts industries. So economic downturns or shifts in global markets can have a profound impact on the employment landscape and the overall well-being of residents in industrial communities. Knowledge-based communities are focused on like technology or resource, and they're often characterized by a highly skilled or educated labor force. So things like human capital not being able to be educated will have a long-term effect on communities like this. Tourism-dependent communities, these are seasonal shifts in labor forces. Diverse communities, those with a diverse labor force benefit from a variety of perspectives, skills, and cultural contributions. Important organizations related to labor rights violations include government and non-government actors. On the government side of things, there's the International Labor Organization, or the ILO. It's an agency under the UN, which was founded in 1919. It solidified later in 1930s, I believe. It applies to the 187 states within the organization, and the fundamental principles are the freedom to associate, the abolition of forced labor, equal opportunity, and safe and healthy working environments. It operates on a global scale. The limitation, of course, is that it is only applying to the countries under the UN. Now, in terms of non-government actors, there's the Human Rights Watch, which is the largest U.S. human rights organization. It was founded in 1978 with headquarters in New York City. It investigates and reports on labor rights violations in every part of the world. So while it is a U.S.-based organization, it does operate on an international scale in terms of finding violations.
And another non-government organization is the Fair Labor Association, which is an international network that serves to promote workers' rights. It consists of universities, companies, and civil society organizations. This non-government actor is one that does not operate only in the US, which is important to globally pull all of the violations together, because it is not something that just happens in the US, it happens on a global scale. Labor unions are another important aspect of labor rights violations because they function as a way to solve some of them. So defined, unions consist of workers coming together to barter and impose conditions of a contract with management to accomplish a set of goals. These goals typically involve workers addressing their wants and needs. The structure is democratic, where members elect a leader who advocate for their desires. Goals include, but are not limited to, consistent schedules / no mandatory overtime, paid vacation / time off, childcare, higher wages, student loan repayment and scholarships, better benefits, whether that be insurance, healthcare, pension, etc., safer workplaces, and job security. Labor unions
Luckily for us, there are solutions to labor rights violations. These solutions include joining advocacy groups, engaging in public awareness, advocating for policy change, strikes, and promoting the UN. So for joining advocacy groups, there are many organizations that work to promote and protect labor rights. Unions are one of those, which we described in the previous slide. People can consider joining or supporting even these groups to amplify their impact. Public awareness involves posting on social media or reaching out to local news sites to get information heard. The more that people know about labor rights violations, the more vocal they can be about it and the more we can do about it. Advocating for policy change, this is something individually you can do directly by writing a letter or attending town hall meetings or hosting protests even. Strikes have been useful in the past too. It involves refusing to work until management gives in to demands. That's more of a worker-based solution though. And then finally, promoting the UN. The more countries that are involved in the UN, the more that are required to follow the guidelines of the ILO. So if we can get countries with human rights violations that are greater in number into the organization, it's likely that the violations themselves will decrease in number as well.